The strangest thing about the girl was not the chain. It was the fact that nobody would look at her. Cairo Station never slept. The massive trade hub drifted at the edge of known space, a floating city of steel and glass where merchants, travelers, and freight crews from 1,000 worlds crossed paths every day. Bright neon signs flickered above crowded walkways. Cargo haulers rumbled through transit lanes. Vendors shouted prices in half a dozen languages, while holographic advertisements painted shifting colors across the metallic streets. Life moved constantly, fast, loud, unstoppable, except at the very edge of the market. There, where the bright lights faded into shadow and the crowds thinned, people walked a little faster. Conversations grew quieter. Eyes turned away. Beneath a rusted shelter attached to an aging support column sat a young alien woman. A thin chain connected one wrist to a steel ring embedded in the floor. Above her hung a weathered metal sign. The words had faded from years of dust and neglect, but they were still readable. Free. Please take her. Thousands of people passed that sign every week. Thousands ignored it. Lyra Voss sat perfectly still beneath the shelter. Her pale blue skin reflected the soft glow of nearby station lights. Long silver-white hair spilled over her shoulders, stirred occasionally by warm air flowing from the station's ventilation systems. Her violet eyes remained fixed on the floor. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was ashamed. She had simply grown tired of watching people choose not to see her. A family of traders hurried past. Their young son slowed for a moment, staring curiously toward the shelter. His mother immediately pulled him away. A maintenance worker changed direction after noticing the sign. Two cargo pilots carrying equipment crossed to the opposite side of the walkway without saying a word. The reactions were always the same. Different faces, different species, same result. Lyra no longer counted the days. After enough time, counting became another form of disappointment. Somewhere high above, a transport vessel thundered away from its docking berth. The vibration traveled through the station's metal framework and into the floor beneath her feet. She barely noticed. Most sounds blended together now. Engines, announcements, footsteps, voices, the endless rhythm of lives continuing without her. Then something unusual happened. Someone stopped. Lyra did not look up immediately. Experience had taught her that curiosity rarely lasted. Most people paused for a few seconds, read the sign, remembered the rumors, and moved on. Yet the footsteps remained. A few moments passed, then a few more. Finally, she raised her eyes. A human man stood several feet away. Mid-30s. White skin. Broad shoulders. Weathered brown jacket. Travel bag slung over one shoulder. His face carried the tired look of someone who spent more time among stars than planets. Unlike everyone else, he was not staring at the chain. He was studying the sign. Confusion furrowed his brow. Genuine confusion. As though he could not understand why such a thing existed. Lyra watched him carefully. Humans were rare on Cairo Station. Most preferred larger trade routes closer to Earth-controlled systems. This one looked like a freight pilot. Independent. Practical. The kind of man who measured life in cargo schedules and fuel consumption. He glanced around the nearly empty corridor before looking back at her. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The station buzzed around them. Lights flickered. Distant engines hummed. Somewhere nearby, a vendor closed a metal security shutter for the night. Still, the human remained where he stood. Then he did something nobody had done in a very long time. He stepped closer, and for the first time in years, Lyra felt something she had almost forgotten. Curiosity. The human stopped close enough to read the faded letters, but not so close that it felt threatening. Lyra noticed that immediately. Most people who approached her either kept their distance or stared as though she were some kind of dangerous exhibit. This man did neither. He simply looked confused. The expression sat awkwardly on his face, as if the entire situation offended his sense of logic. For several seconds, he studied the sign again. Then he looked directly at her. What happened? The question caught her off guard. Not because it was difficult, because it was different. Most people asked what she was. Nobody asked what happened. Lyra remained silent. Experience had taught her that answers rarely changed anything. The human seemed to understand. He shifted the travel bag on his shoulder and glanced around the nearly deserted market. Vendors were beginning to close their stalls. Automated cleaning units rolled across the metallic walkways. The bright chaos of the station was slowly giving way to the quieter hours of the night. "All right," he said. "Maybe I should start with something easier." He extended a hand toward her. "Ethan Walker." Lyra stared at the offered hand. For a moment, she almost forgot how to respond. It had been years since anyone introduced themselves. Eventually, she answered. "Lyra." Ethan smiled slightly. "Nice to meet you, Lyra." The words felt strange. Ordinary. Simple. Human. Somewhere nearby, a cargo drone lifted off from a loading platform, its engines humming softly through the station air. Lyra found herself studying Ethan more closely. White skin, brown hair, blue-gray eyes. The look of a man who spent long months traveling alone. His jacket carried scratches and wear from years of work. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status. Yet he remained standing there when everyone else walked away. "You are not from here," she said quietly. Ethan laughed. "That obvious?" "Very." He nodded toward the crowded station beyond the market. "Cargo run. I am supposed to leave tomorrow morning." Lyra lowered her gaze. People were always leaving. That was the nature of stations like Kairos. Everyone arrived from somewhere and departed for somewhere else. Nobody stayed. Ethan looked back toward the sign. His expression hardened slightly. Why does nobody stop? The question lingered between them. Lyra already knew the answer. She had heard it whispered thousands of times. Yet before she could speak, another voice interrupted. "Because she is trouble." Both turned. An older merchant stood in the doorway of a nearby stall. His gray skin looked pale beneath the station lights. He was watching Ethan with open concern. "Human," the merchant called. "Walk away." Ethan frowned. "Why?" The merchant glanced toward Lyra and immediately looked away. "Because nobody who gets involved with her stays lucky for long." Ethan folded his arms. "That is not an answer." The merchant sighed heavily. "Then here is one. Leave her alone." The old alien disappeared back into his shop before Ethan could ask another question. Moments later, a metal shutter dropped over the entrance with a loud metallic crash. Silence returned. Ethan watched the closed stall for several seconds. Then he looked back at Lyra. "That happens a lot." Lyra nodded. "More than you would think." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. The station lights reflected in his eyes as he glanced from the sign to the chain and back again. Nothing about the situation made sense to him. Lyra could see it. Humans often hid their thoughts poorly. His curiosity was becoming impossible to ignore. Finally, he looked at her and asked the one question nobody else had dared to ask in years. What are they so afraid of? For the first time that evening, Lyra did not know how to answer. Lyra looked away from Ethan's question and toward the endless flow of people moving through the station. Travelers carried luggage. Merchants pushed cargo carts. Dockworkers hurried between loading bays. Life continued around her exactly as it had for years. Nobody stopped. Nobody listened. Nobody cared enough to ask what was true. "I do not know," she said at last. Ethan frowned. "You do not know?" A faint breeze drifted through the corridor, carrying the scent of machine oil and fresh food from a nearby vendor. Lyra wrapped her fingers loosely around one of the chain links. The metal felt cool against her skin. "At first they were afraid of me." Her eyes remained fixed on the crowd. "Then they were afraid of the stories." After a while, nobody remembered the difference. Ethan considered that. It sounded less like an answer and more like a warning. Somewhere above them, a station announcement echoed through hidden speakers. A transport bound for the outer colonies was preparing for departure. The familiar voice faded into the background noise of the station. Ethan glanced at the chain again. The more he looked at it, the stranger it seemed. The links were old, worn, almost ceremonial. They looked completely out of place among the advanced technology surrounding them. "Can I ask something?" Lyra nodded slightly. "If you wanted to leave, could you?" For the first time, a hint of surprise crossed her face. Most people assumed the chain was the problem. Ethan seemed more interested in whether it mattered. Lyra lowered her eyes toward the floor. "Yes." Ethan blinked. "You could." The lock stopped working years ago. The answer settled heavily between them. Ethan stared at the chain in disbelief. Then he looked back toward the sign hanging above her. The faded words suddenly seemed far more disturbing than the restraint itself. "Then why stay?" Lyra was quiet for several moments. Around them, the evening crowd continued to thin. Metal security shutters rolled down across storefronts. Neon advertisements dimmed into nighttime settings. The station slowly shifted into its quieter hours. Finally she answered. "Because everywhere else was worse." Ethan did not immediately respond. Something about the way she said it made further questions feel unnecessary. Whatever had happened before Caro's station clearly belonged to a chapter she was not ready to discuss. Before he could speak again, a small object struck the floor nearby with a metallic click. Both of them looked down. It was a data chip. Plain. Unmarked. Someone had thrown it from somewhere within the crowd. Ethan immediately scanned the surrounding corridor. Hundreds of faces. Dozens of species. Nobody appeared interested. Nobody appeared guilty. Whoever had thrown it was already gone. Ethan crouched and picked up the chip. Expecting messages? He asked. Lyra's expression changed instantly. A shadow passed through her eyes. No. That single word carried enough weight to make Ethan uneasy. He turned the chip over in his hand. No identifying marks. No station seal. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of him. He inserted it into his portable reader. The screen activated immediately. One line of text appeared against a black background. Leave her alone. Ethan read the message. Twice. Then a third time. No sender. No explanation. Just a warning. He slowly looked toward Lyra. She had gone completely still. Not frightened. Resigned. As though she had seen this before. Ethan closed the device and slipped it into his jacket pocket. How often does this happen? Lyra stared into the distance beyond the market. Often enough. The answer did not satisfy him. If anything, it raised more questions. Someone was watching. Someone cared enough to send warnings. And someone clearly did not want strangers asking questions. Ethan looked around the station one more time. The endless river of people flowed past without noticing. Yet for the first time since arriving on Caros, he had the unmistakable feeling that the crowd was hiding something. And somewhere inside that hidden truth was the reason an entire station had spent years pretending a lonely girl did not exist. The message should have frightened Ethan. Instead, it irritated him. He had spent most of his adult life hauling freight through unstable sectors, negotiating with stubborn port officials, and surviving mechanical failures hundreds of millions of miles from the nearest repair station. Anonymous warnings ranked fairly low on his list of concerns. He leaned against a nearby support column and watched the endless river of travelers flow through the market district. Someone really does not want people talking to you, he said. Lyra lowered her eyes toward the chain. I told you that you should leave. Ethan shook his head. That is not an explanation. The station lights shifted into their nighttime cycle, casting cool blue reflections across the metallic floor. One by one, nearby vendors finished closing their shops. The noise level dropped noticeably. What had been a crowded commercial district an hour earlier now felt strangely hollow. Ethan noticed something else as well. Several people were watching them. Not openly. Quick glances. Brief looks. Then immediate avoidance whenever he met their gaze. It was as if the entire area shared a secret nobody wanted to discuss. How long have you been here? He asked. Lyra hesitated. Almost 4 years. Ethan stared at her. 4 years. She nodded. I arrived during a trade summit. And nobody helped you? A faint smile crossed her face, but there was no happiness in it. At first, many tried. Ethan waited. Something in her tone suggested the story did not end well. Then the rumors started. The distant hum of an arriving cargo vessel vibrated through the station structure. Lyra watched the lights moving beyond the transparent dome overhead. People began receiving warnings. Businesses were told to stay away from me. Records disappeared. Questions stopped being asked. Ethan frowned. That sounds organized. For the first time, Lyra looked directly at him. Exactly. The answer settled heavily between them. Ethan was beginning to realize that this was not a story about superstition. Someone had built this situation deliberately. Someone had spent years making sure she remained isolated. The realization made him uneasy. Suddenly, a small service drone rolled into the corridor. The machine moved directly toward them before stopping beside the shelter. A sealed container rested inside its cargo compartment. Ethan looked around. No operator. No identifying marks. The drone emitted a soft tone and immediately departed. The container remained. Lyra stared at it. That is new. Ethan carefully opened the lid. Inside sat 2 hot meal packs and a bottle of purified water. Nothing else. No message. No explanation. Just food. He looked at Lyra. Expecting company? She shook her head. Ethan examined the container again. The meals were fresh. Recently prepared. Someone nearby had sent them. The question was why. As if answering him, He noticed movement on the second-level walkway overlooking the market. A figure stood behind the railing, partially hidden in shadow. The distance made details impossible to see. The stranger remained motionless for several seconds before disappearing into the crowd. Ethan immediately looked back toward Lyra. Did you see that? Her expression had changed. Not fear. Recognition. Yes. Ethan followed the empty walkway with his eyes. Who was it? Lyra took a slow breath. The station seemed quieter than ever. Even the air felt heavier. Finally she spoke. The same person who has been watching me for years. The words lingered between them long after Lyra spoke them. Ethan found himself staring at the empty second-level walkway where the mysterious figure had vanished. The market district had nearly emptied now. Most of the station's commercial traffic had moved toward the transportation hubs and residential sectors. Only a handful of late-night workers remained. Their footsteps echoed through the metallic corridors before disappearing into the distance. The silence felt different than before. Heavier. More personal. Ethan looked down at the meal container resting beside them. Steam still drifted from the unopened food packs. Someone had sent them. Someone who knew exactly where Lyra would be. Someone who had been watching. And you never learned who they are? He asked quietly. Lyra shook her head. Not exactly. Ethan sat down on a nearby cargo crate. The old metal groaned beneath his weight. Above them, countless stars shimmered beyond the station's transparent dome. Cargo ships moved slowly through designated traffic lanes, their navigation lights drifting across the darkness like distant lanterns. For a moment neither spoke. Then Lyra reached for one of the meal packs. Her movements were careful, almost hesitant. The first package arrived 6 months after I came here. Ethan listened. Food. She nodded. Food. Water. Occasionally medicine. The soft station lights reflected across her silver hair. Never messages. Ethan glanced toward the empty walkway again. Until now. Lyra followed his gaze. Yes. The realization unsettled both of them. Whoever had been watching her had chosen this particular night to act differently. That could not be coincidence. Ethan opened one of the meal packs and handed it to her. She accepted it without protest. The simple exchange felt strangely important. Human. Normal. The kind of moment that should not have felt rare. Yet it did. As they ate, Ethan noticed something else. For the first time since he arrived, Lyra seemed less guarded. Not happy. Not comfortable. Just slightly less alone. The difference was subtle but impossible to miss. What were you before this? He asked. Lyra looked down. Into her meal container. The question clearly touched something deeper than he intended. Someone else. Ethan smiled faintly. That sounds dramatic. To his surprise, she laughed softly. The sound was brief but genuine. Maybe it is. The laughter faded and silence returned. Yet something had changed. The invisible distance between them felt smaller now. Around them, the station continued its endless rhythm. Ventilation systems hummed overhead. Automated cleaning drones rolled through distant corridors. Somewhere far below, a freighter released docking clamps with a deep metallic thud. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Ethan found himself wondering how many years had passed since Lyra experienced anything ordinary. Then a low chime echoed from his wrist terminal. He frowned and activated the screen. No sender information appeared. Just a simple notification. An incoming public docking schedule update. Ethan almost ignored it. Then one detail caught his attention. A vessel had been added to tomorrow's arrival list only moments ago. No registration number. No listed owner. No cargo declaration. Several fields were completely blank. Ethan stared at the screen. In his experience, ships without records rarely brought good news. Lyra noticed his expression immediately. What is it? Ethan slowly turned the display toward her. Her eyes moved across the information. The color drained from her face. She stopped breathing for a second. Then she whispered 3 words so quietly that he almost missed them. They found me. The distant stars beyond the dome suddenly felt much colder. For several seconds Ethan simply stared at the docking notice. The screen remained unchanged. No registration number. No ownership records. No cargo declaration. Just an empty shell of information moving through official channels as if the rules no longer applied. Around them, the station continued its nighttime routine. Air recyclers hummed softly overhead. Maintenance drones followed glowing guide paths across distant corridors. Somewhere far beyond the market district, a transport vessel announced its departure. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet the fear in Lyra's eyes made everything feel different. Ethan lowered the terminal. Who are they? Lyra did not answer immediately. Her attention remained fixed on the screen, as though the words themselves might change if she looked long enough. Finally she whispered, I do not know exactly. Ethan frowned. You just said they found you. Because they always come when records start moving. The answer only deepened the mystery. Ethan sat back on the cargo crate and studied her carefully. The pale blue glow of nearby station lights reflected across her skin. For the first time since he met her, she looked genuinely unsettled. Not by rumors. Not by strangers. By memory. Start from the beginning, he said gently. Lyra closed her eyes. The station noise seemed to fade around them. When I arrived here, I still had identification records, travel permits, family archives. She opened her eyes again. Within weeks, they began disappearing. Ethan listened without interrupting. Government databases lost information. Public records became incomplete. Names vanished. Her voice grew quieter. Eventually, it was as if my life had never existed. A chill settled in Ethan's chest. Records did not simply disappear across multiple systems by accident. Not on that scale. Someone had done it deliberately, and nobody investigated. Lyra laughed softly. The sound carried no amusement. Some tried. Ethan immediately remembered the anonymous warning. The strange packages. The hidden observer on the walkway. Pieces of a much larger puzzle. Above them, a massive freighter crossed the transparent dome. Its running lights drifted across the stars like moving constellations. Ethan found himself wondering how many people on this station knew the truth. Maybe dozens. Maybe hundreds. Maybe none at all. Then another thought occurred to him. The person sending the food. Lyra looked up. What about them? If someone wanted you forgotten, why would another person spend years helping you survive? For the first time that night, uncertainty appeared on her face. I have asked myself that question many times. Ethan leaned forward, and she slowly shook her head. I never found an answer. Silence returned. The market district was nearly empty now. Long shadows stretched across the metallic floor. Neon signs reflected in puddles left by cleaning drones. The entire station felt suspended between night and morning. Then Ethan's terminal chimed again. Both of them froze. Another incoming notification. No sender. No identification. Ethan activated the message. This time there was only a single sentence. Arrival confirmed. Berth 12. ETA 6 hours. Lyra's face went pale. Ethan looked from the screen to her expression. You recognize that berth? She nodded. Very slowly. Nobody uses berth 12 anymore. The words hung in the air. Ethan glanced toward the distant docking districts beyond the market. Thousands of lights stretched across the station like a mechanical city beneath the stars. Somewhere out there, a ship with no history was already on its way. And for the first time since stepping into the market, Ethan had the unmistakable feeling that tomorrow was going to change everything. 6 hours sounded like a long time until Ethan looked at the station clock. The numbers seemed to move faster after that. He and Lyra remained beneath the shelter while the artificial night deepened around them. Most of the market district had gone dark. Only maintenance lights and emergency markers illuminated the vast corridors. The crowds were gone now. The endless noise of commerce had faded into a distant mechanical hum. Somewhere far below, power systems pulsed through the station like a giant heartbeat. Ethan sat quietly, watching the stars beyond the transparent dome. Lyra stood nearby, her eyes fixed on the distant docking sectors hidden beyond layers of steel and glass. Neither spoke for a long time. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence. Tell me about berth 12. Lyra hesitated. The question clearly touched another memory she would rather avoid. When I first arrived here, it was active. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Diplomatic ships used it. Government vessels. People with influence. Ethan listened carefully. Then what happened? Lyra folded her arms across herself. One day it closed. Just like that. She nodded. No explanation. No announcements. The entire section was sealed. Ethan frowned. Nothing about that sounded normal. Stations depended on efficiency. Closing a major berth without explanation made no sense. Unless someone wanted privacy. Or secrecy. The thought lingered in his mind. Then another memory surfaced. The anonymous warnings. The erased records. The hidden observer. Everything seemed connected to people who preferred operating out of sight. Above them, a cargo shuttle crossed the dome and vanished into the darkness beyond. Ethan followed its path until the lights disappeared. If whoever is coming wanted to find you, why wait 4 years? Lyra finally looked at him. Her expression carried a sadness that seemed older than the station itself. Maybe they thought I was already forgotten. The answer struck Ethan harder than he expected. Forgotten. Not hidden. Not imprisoned. Forgotten. There was a difference. One hurt more. Before he could respond, movement caught his attention. A figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. Not the mysterious observer from before. Someone else. An elderly station worker pushing a maintenance cart. The old alien moved slowly toward them, glancing over his shoulder several times as if making sure he was not being watched. When he reached the shelter, he stopped. His hands trembled slightly. "Human," he said quietly. Ethan stood. "Can I help you?" The worker looked directly at Lyra for the first time. Unlike everyone else, he did not immediately look away. There was guilt in his eyes. "Regret. I remember you," he said softly. Lyra froze. The old worker swallowed hard. "I remember when they brought you here." Silence filled the corridor. Ethan felt every muscle in his body tighten. The worker reached into his jacket and removed a small metallic access card. Its surface was scratched with age. He placed it on the shelter bench beside Lyra. "I should have spoken years ago." His voice cracked. "I am sorry." Before either of them could ask a question, the old alien turned and hurried away. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness. Ethan stared at the card. No markings. No identification. Just a number engraved into the metal. 12. Slowly, Lyra reached toward it. Her hand trembled. "This," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "What is it?" Her luminous eyes remained fixed on the card. For the first time since he met her, hope appeared alongside the fear. "This is a key." The small metallic card felt impossibly heavy in Lyra's hand. For years she had lived among questions. Questions without answers. Warnings without explanations. Memories that seemed to belong to someone else. Yet now, for the first time, she possessed something tangible. Proof that the silence surrounding her had not been an accident. Ethan examined the engraved number again. 12. Nothing more. No name. No authorization seal. No instructions. Just a destination. The station clock advanced another hour. For remained until the unidentified vessel reached Kairos. The artificial night was beginning to fade into the station's early morning cycle. Soft amber lights replaced the colder blues overhead. Maintenance crews started appearing in distant corridors. Life was slowly returning to the station. Ethan stood and looked toward the transportation maps displayed across the market district. If this is a key, where does it go? Lyra stared at the card for several seconds before answering. "I think I know." Her voice carried a mixture of fear and certainty. Ethan noticed it immediately. "You have been there before?" She nodded slowly. "A long time ago." Together they left the shelter for the first time that night. Lyra hesitated when she stepped beyond the familiar boundary of the support column. For years of habit did not disappear easily. Ethan noticed her pause, but said nothing. Sometimes kindness meant allowing someone to take their own first step. The market corridor stretched ahead beneath rows of glowing lights. Few people paid attention to them. Those who did quickly looked away. Old habits survived longer than truth. The station maps guided them toward a restricted transit sector near the edge of the docking districts. The farther they traveled, the quieter everything became. Commercial traffic disappeared. Storefronts gave way to maintenance access corridors and sealed service tunnels. Dust-coated surfaces that should have been clean. Ethan frowned. "Nobody comes here." Lyra's expression darkened. "Exactly." Eventually they reached a security checkpoint abandoned years earlier. The gate remained locked. Warning lights blinked weakly beside a card reader covered in scratches. Above the entrance, faded lettering identified the sector. Berth 12 access. Ethan exchanged a glance with Lyra. Neither spoke. Slowly she inserted the metallic card into the reader. For a moment nothing happened. Then a low tone echoed through the corridor. Ancient mechanisms awakened somewhere deep within the walls. Dust drifted from the ceiling as dormant systems came alive. The gate slid open several inches before stopping. Beyond it stretched a dark passage illuminated only by emergency lights. Ethan felt a chill run through him. Not fear. Anticipation. The corridor looked untouched by time. Lyra stepped forward first. Her luminous eyes reflected the faint amber lights ahead. The passage opened into a massive observation chamber overlooking an isolated docking platform. Rows of dormant terminals lined the walls. Most were dark. One remained active. A single screen glowed softly in the center of the room. Lyra approached it slowly. Her breathing became uneven. Ethan followed close behind. The screen displayed an old photograph. A family portrait. Several figures stood together beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. At the center was a younger Lyra. Beside her stood people whose faces mirrored her features. Her silver hair, her eyes, her smile. Ethan watched the color drain from her face. Then he noticed the text beneath the image. Missing person report. Status, unresolved. File preserved by order of the Astral Archive. Lyra stared at the words as if seeing sunlight after years underground. Someone had not forgotten her. Someone had spent 4 years protecting the last surviving record. And somewhere beyond the station walls, a ship was already coming to finish a story that had never truly ended. The observation chamber remained silent except for the faint hum of ancient systems awakening after years of neglect. Lyra stood motionless before the glowing screen, her violet eyes fixed on the faces frozen in the photograph. For years she had questioned her own memories. For years of rumors, warnings, and isolation had slowly convinced her that perhaps the past she remembered no longer mattered. Yet here it was. Proof. Names. Records. A family that had existed. A life that had been real. Ethan remained beside her without speaking. He understood that some moments belonged to silence. Beyond the massive observation window, distant docking lights shimmered across the forgotten berth. Then a soft tone echoed through the chamber. Another terminal activated, followed by another. One by one, dormant screens flickered to life around the room. Files appeared. Historical records. Archived communications. Images of diplomatic gatherings. Scientific expeditions. Entire chapters of history that someone had tried very hard to erase. Lyra slowly approached the nearest display. Her hands trembled as she read. Astral Archive Preservation Initiative, she whispered. Ethan looked over her shoulder. A final message occupied the center of the screen. Preserve the record. Preserve the witness. For several seconds neither moved. Then understanding settled over the room like sunrise. The mysterious observer. The anonymous food deliveries. The hidden access card. Someone had never been hunting Lyra. Someone had been protecting her. The realization struck with unexpected force. All those years, while an entire station pretended not to see her, one person had quietly refused to let her disappear. A gentle chime interrupted the silence. Ethan checked his terminal. The unidentified vessel had arrived. Through the observation window, they watched a sleek silver ship descend toward the forgotten berth. No alarms sounded. No soldiers emerged. No threats appeared. Instead, a small group of officials stepped onto the platform below. Their movements were calm and deliberate. At their center stood an elderly woman with silver hair and pale blue skin remarkably similar to Lyra's. The moment Lyra saw her, she stopped breathing. The woman looked up toward the observation chamber. Even from a distance, recognition was unmistakable. Ethan turned toward Lyra. Tears glistened in her eyes. But this time, they were not born from grief. For years earlier, she had arrived at Caro's believing she had been abandoned. Now she understood the truth. She had been hidden until the people searching for her could find her safely. The station lights gradually shifted into morning mode. Golden illumination spread across metal walkways and glass corridors throughout Caro's. A new day had begun. Later, as travelers filled the market district once more, one small change immediately drew attention. The old shelter remained. The support column remained. But the chain was gone. The weathered sign was gone too. Lyra carried it herself as she crossed the docking platform toward the waiting ship. Not as a burden. As a reminder. Ethan walked beside her until they reached the boarding ramp. Neither seemed eager to speak first. Finally, Lyra smiled. A real smile. Warm. Unafraid. You stopped, she said quietly. Ethan slipped his hands into his jacket pockets and shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. She laughed softly. The sound carried easily through the morning air. Then she extended her hand. Ethan accepted it. No promises. No grand speeches. Just gratitude. Just understanding. As the ship prepared for departure, Lyra looked back one final time. The crowded station bustled with life. Thousands of people moved through the market below. Most would never know her story. That was all right. They did not need to. One person had stopped. One person had listened. One person had seen her when nobody else would. And sometimes, in a galaxy filled with power, secrets, and forgotten histories, that was enough to change a life forever.